Tonight on Mississippi Insight, Tate Reeves takes office. The new governor sweeps into office promising to be a uniter. But can he bring the state together, and how much can he get done? And what about the big issues on the minds of many, fixing the state's prison? Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. The Tate Reeves administration officially started this past week in Mississippi, the governor taking the oath of office and promising to be a governor for all Mississippi. One of his first acts is to find a commissioner for the state's troubled prison system, appointing a task force just to do that. 12 News' senior political reporter Gerald Harris has the story.
In an attempt to find the best person suited to handle the issues at Mississippi state prisons, Governor Tate Reeves is putting together a task force.
It's time to roll up our sleeves and get to work. We know the hurdles that we face, and we know that we can't do it alone.
Reeves has appointed Boyle, Mississippi's Mayor Tommy Taylor as interim commissioner until a new one is found.
Mayor Taylor has proven his dedication to serving our citizens, and today he is stepping up to serve Mississippi once again.
Reeves says the work should start right away. He appointed Vicksburg's Mayor George Flaggs to chair the committee, alongside 2 district attorneys, a judge, a former state parole board member, a current sheriff, and a retired sheriff.
I know that a lot of people want to play the blame game and point fingers here or point fingers there. None of that really matters. We are where we are today, and our job as leaders, and I've been in this position for a little less than 48 hours, our job as leaders is to develop a plan and a path forward.
As Lieutenant Governor, he did not sign off on the recommendations of the former Mississippi Department of Corrections Commissioner to increase the funding levels to the requested level. He said that he's not at liberty to confirm that numbers asked for then are realistic projections.
And we are going to ask for the amount of funding that is necessary to properly and adequately house these prisoners, but we're not going to do what some have done in the past and some may do in the future, which is just ask for money, 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 and think that money is the only thing that solves these challenges.
None of the people on the committee are being paid, and there's no time frame for which a permanent commissioner will be announced.
Joining me now in the studio, we talk about the new Reeves administration, are 2 former members of the State House, Republican Mark Baker and Democrat Brandon Jones. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Byron. Glad to be here.
And let's get started about the big issue, and that's dealing with MDOC. This week, the governor appointed a committee to appoint a new commissioner. Let's talk about how important that position is going to be, picking a new commissioner for MDOC. Mark, how important is that going to be for a nationwide search?
I think that everybody is realizing that this is going to probably be one of the most important appointments that Governor Reeves will make in his first term. We all know what's kind of going on within the prison system, and we all know that wholesale change has to occur. And I'm glad that Governor Reeves has taken the initiative like he has, first day in office, to move forward on this issue, form the commission, and I expect good things out of the commission. I expect they'll move swiftly, and they'll, in their work in finding the perfect replacement for that job.
Brandon, the governor has appointed a very diverse search committee or commission to look for a new commissioner. What do you think that the governor is looking for, or what kind of recommendation do you think he's going to be seeking?
Well, I agree with Mark. This is a crucial appointment, and I think it shows the proper deliberation to have this type of a committee, to not try to rush any type of decision. And you mentioned a nationwide search. I think some people may not appreciate that corrections is its own, it has its own master's degree and doctorate degree associated with it. There's a whole background of educational and innovative material that goes into being a sound corrections official. And so casting a wide net, I think, would benefit Mississippi. We certainly have many challenges, not just trying to stretch a dollar, but also just the logistics problems that we've run into over the last couple weeks. So I think this is a huge deal. I think that Governor Reeves has shown some good thoughtfulness in the early going. So I'm hopeful that we're going to reach a good decision.
There is more to just picking a commissioner to deal with the issues that we have at MDOC. Mark, what do we need to do to fix the problems within our prison system?
Well, I mean, when you look at the prison system, you're dealing with not only the prison population, but you're dealing with the workforce that's involved with the prison system, and you're dealing with the administration. And so There are problems on all ends here, and we've got to look and address these issues one at a time and then collectively and see where we fall with regard to this. I think it begins with leadership. Everything begins with leadership, in my opinion, and when you put a strong leader in place, a strong commissioner in place, working for a governor who's committed to this issue by the timeliness of his actions, I think you'll find a swift change within the system. One of the things that I think we need to look primarily at are the disproportionate sentences that are being handed out to those that are in the prison system. And I go back to this case that happened that was handed down by the Supreme Court just this week, where this individual was sentenced to 12 years for the possession of a cell phone. He was in jail on a misdemeanor offense, sentenced to 12 years for a cell phone. The taxpayers of the state of Mississippi, if you consider that $40,000 a year is how much it costs to house prisoners, the taxpayers of the state of Mississippi are going to pay $440,000 to house this individual because he possessed a cell phone. And I think that that is a clear signal that something is not right in the system. I'm disappointed in the Supreme Court. This decision that was handed down that affirmed this decision was a 9-0 decision. All members of the court joined in this opinion. And candidly, I can't see how that happened. It's got to change. On the other side of this, we have upwards of 80 individuals that are in prison today that are serving sentences of 50 years or more, essentially life without parole for nonviolent crimes, drug offenses, 21 of those for simple possession. Now, we have got to look at the question of who are we mad at and who are we scared of? Because those people that we're mad at, we need to look at and make sure the sentences are proportioned and make sure we can get them back into society in a way that they will be productive citizens. And those that we're scared of, we need to leave there and move on. But we can't move all the mad ats into the scared of category, and we have to look at this with an eye toward what are we trying to do? And we can't sustain the system the way it is. We just can't keep putting people in jail and throwing away the key. It's just not going to work.
Brandon, what would you like to see done? And we were talking about prison sentences. What kind of reform would you like to see done here in the state?
Look, I hate to sound like the amen corner from my friend Mark here, but he said it exactly right. This Nash case is emblematic of the problem. We have habitual laws that cause nonviolent offenders to spend, many, many years in jail beyond what makes any sense. We also, like many other states, rolled back parole back in the mid-90s in a way that I think has proven to be problematic. We have folks who are nonviolent offenders, and we're spending millions of dollars to house them each year. And so I think if the legislature and the executive office choose to look at this thing as a Band-Aid appropriation, they're not taking in the full nature of the problem. We clearly have a numbers problem, and we need to reduce the number of folks that we're housing. And so what I'm hopeful about is that we will reevaluate our resources, see if we're right-sizing staff, if we're making the appropriate moves there, but then also, to Mark's point, look at how we're doing sentencing, because we got a real inequity built into the system right now.
And some would tell you, well, what we need is sentencing reform, and okay, that's fine. We can talk about guidelines, and we can argue about guidelines. What we need right now, though, is we need the legislature to form a sentencing commission, to appoint diverse individuals, just as we heard about in the commission, that the search committee that the governor has appointed, and give them the authority to review nonviolent sentences and to reduce those and to come up with alternates to incarceration.
We talk about a lot of people are talking about the cost of dealing with this and the money and staff and everything else. How much money do we need to put back into the prison system?
Well, that's a loaded question. I think that if you ask our past few commissioners, they would say that we've been pretty consistently coming below what they've asked for. But I don't know that that's an easy answer to get at. I mean, clearly I think there seems to be some recognition that we can do much better. But that's not, as to Mark's point, that's not the whole ball game here. It's a much bigger question than that. And it could start with, I believe, properly looking at the law and how we're sentencing folks as it stands. And that could go a long way towards reducing the crunch that the department's feeling.
Go ahead.
I just think when you begin the conversation with how much money, you're not looking at the conversation, you're not considering the elements of the conversation properly. Money won't solve everything. Money will address some things, but just simply saying more money, more this, all that does is just move the problem down the road. And we just can't look at it like that. We have to look at how do we reform this system.
Brandon, are you confident that the legislature will do something this legislative session that will have some really substantive changes to the system?
You know, my confidence in that body kind of waxes and wanes. I don't know. I will say that we're having conversations that we haven't had in quite some time. It's hard to avoid the seriousness of the moment. And you hope that there can be something good come out of crises like this one where we start to think critically about these problems. So what we're hearing talked about is all the things that we've mentioned, including how we handle matters like simple possession. There's a whole host of options that are on the table. But I join Mark in hoping that they won't look for some type of simple appropriation fix, because that's clearly not going to address the full nature of the problem.
Let's talk a little bit about the governor. I mean, he was sworn in earlier this week, and this has come. The NDOC has been a crisis that's really come at him. What do you expect that the governor will get for the first couple of months that he's in office? I know we were talking about infrastructure, teacher pay, and healthcare. Those were the issues on the campaign, but this is kind of dominated now. Well, what do you see happening with the governor over the next couple of months?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I think we need to be cognizant of is that governors and representatives, senators, whatnot, they're not only just doing one thing. The entire focus of the legislature, the entire focus of the executive branch is not just on MDOC. So I expect to see that Governor Reeves will continue to pursue the things that he talked about in the campaign. Continue to look at ways to, we talk about education reform. We can argue about it, the results are there. I tell people that even if you're on the right track, if you're standing still, you're going to get run over. And I think Governor Reeves is going to take and build on the successes that we've had in education and third grade gate and the other things that we can talk about at length, but build on those education reforms and continue that. Teacher pay raise is one component of that, and that's important, but more money in the classroom is one component of that, and that's important. Funding is a component of that, and that's important, but success in supporting teachers and administrators and students is an important component. So you have education, you have MDOC. I think we're going to go back and look at infrastructure. We spent a lot of time in the last couple sessions in a special session talking about funding issues. And so we have a lot of funding mechanisms that are in place. It's too early to tell what that means because we're not fully online with the lottery yet. We have the scratch-offs, but we're not in the Powerball or the Mega Millions, and so we really don't have a good feel for that yet. And so I think a lot of that's going to be kind of a wait and see. Let's see how that funding goes, and let's see what else we can do with regard to infrastructure to move that ball further down the field. I'm sure there's going to be a litany of issues, but I expect Governor Reeves to govern in much the same way that he governed as a lieutenant governor. Listen to the issues and move forward in a clear path, obviously in a conservative point of view, and get things done.
And your thoughts on some of these issues that the governor's going to be tackling in the next 90 days?
You heard during his inaugural address, he mentioned economic development over and over again. I think Mark and I would agree that if you're going to do any significant economic development, you have to address the quality of life issues in your state. Before any company is going to invest in your state, they want to make sure that they have good hospitals for their families to have available to their families. They want to have good roads and bridges, and they want to have a quality education system. The governor and this legislature inherit significant challenges in those areas. We've seen rural hospitals close. We continue to have challenges with our infrastructure and our schools. You know, while we have done some things like the reading gate and other things to bring up some of our progress, we still lag behind the national average in some key indicators. And so those bread and butter basic issues remain at the forefront and will have to be addressed. I was struck by the fact that I knew Lieutenant Governor Reeves as a bit of a micromanager. I felt like he kind of lorded over those committees and kept a pretty heavy hand on what came in and out. It sounded like he was willing to take a more stepped back approach and to allow some ideas to come at him. I do believe that that legislature works best when it serves like a laboratory of ideas, and you let some things move about.
Well, speaking of that, Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann seems open to a lot of different ideas and has really been pretty aggressive in some of the things that he wants to do. What do you think about his approach to governing?
Well, you know, as a Democrat, we certainly, it's no secret that we're in a super minority in both the House and the Senate, and now we have lost the Attorney General's seat, and so our position of power has really fallen back a couple notches, and it was already not great back whenever Mark and I were serving. So the move to appoint Democrats to some major committees in the Senate was not insignificant. I thought that that was an effort towards a bipartisanship. It was an effort towards working together in a way that is certainly welcome. You know, having a chair of corrections, that's a Democrat. Having a chair of public health, that's a Democrat. Those points were not lost on many of us. But, you know, true to form, the lieutenant governor showed up at the first appropriations meeting that was held. That's a pretty unusual step. So I think he's going to have a pretty hands-on approach to the way that some of these things develop. But the tone, the nature of the committee assignments should give folks cause for hope that this could be a little bit more of a working together situation there in the Senate and hopefully in the House as well.
Oh, it was a working together situation. Brandon was just there during the old days. He remembers when his speaker, Billy McCoy, appointed no Republican chairman to any committee. But since Speaker McCoy left, Speaker Gunn and Lieutenant Governor Reeves have both appointed Democrats to high-profile chairmanships, and Governor Hosemann is continuing that process. And so, look, you know, the Clarion Ledger reports about the one or two off cases, situations where you have huge partisan divides. What it doesn't report about is when you're working through the day-to-day legislation and you're working with ideas of the members on both sides of the aisle. And it's been my experience that good ideas come to the top. They just do. Maybe not as quickly as people would like, but they do come out.
The governor talked about wanting to be one Mississippi and unite the state. How do you think he's going to do that, and do you think he'll be able to accomplish that as governor? Mark?
You know, I think it's important, especially, you know, former Democratic member, somebody who's admittedly not been thrilled with the outcome of a lot of our elections over the last few cycles. It's incumbent upon those of us who might not have voted for Governor Reeves or who might not have supported him to at least give that opportunity. I mean, I do agree with the governor when he says that when elections are over, it's time to move on to the next phase, and that's the governance phase. And so I don't know of any other real practical option but to leave space for that. And so I'm encouraging all of my former colleagues and friends to give that process a chance. I mean, I think that if we stand back with our arms crossed and we don't come to the table and try to be a part of doing important things, then we've lost an opportunity. So I take people at their word when they say they want to do something a particular way, give them an opportunity to live into that, and so I hope that's what we do.
A Senate race coming up. Your thoughts on what we might expect in this Senate race that could be between Mike Espy and Cindy Hyde-Smith? This is round 2 going on this time around. What do you anticipate going to happen?
I think it's going to be just a straight continuation of the last race. I don't expect any difference. I expect Senator Hyde-Smith will tell the voters why she should be reelected to this position, and I believe that the voters will find that she's done a very good job for the state of Mississippi, and I expect that she will be reelected. That's just how I see it.
Brandon, any thoughts?
It's going to be hotly contested. I mean, when you're looking at the data of these elections, one thing that we noticed in last November was that Democrats came within 50,000 votes in a statewide race, a major one. That's not insignificant, especially when you consider we're only a couple cycles removed from being over 250,000 votes out of the conversation. Mike Espy came as close as we've had a major candidate come in a United States Senate race in some time. So I think you'll see a hotly competitive race. You wonder to what extent the candidates learned the lessons of the last campaign. They're in a unique situation in the sense that they are just banking off of one of these things. And so it could be that they are able to, incorporate some of those lessons of the campaign trail into this. You can't underestimate the specter of having a presidential campaign, though, at the same time. Donald Trump is clearly popular here in Mississippi, and it would be, Pollyanna for a Democrat to hope that he is not going to drive out a pretty significant voter turnout here in the state. And so I'm sure that SB and his team are thinking through that and thinking of how to play off of that. And of course, Cindy Hyde-Smith, she benefited from it in the past, his endorsement, and I'm sure is thinking the same thing.
When Brandon talks about the turnout in the last election, that we look at those numbers and say that's about all they've got. If you look at Democrats, there's not many more Democrats to show up. Now they can say, if we get a few more, that's fine. But it was one of the highest turnouts. It was a high turnout election, and so I expect that Senator Hyde-Smith will prevail in that election and move forward.
She might have a harder time getting him to Mississippi this time around because there's going to be folks that want him in Wisconsin and Arizona and Michigan and Ohio, so we'll have to see how many of those visits we actually squeeze out of this.
I think Governor Bryant, Governor Reeves, and Senator Hyde-Smith and Senator Work, I bet they figure that out.
We'll see.
The problem is while I'm there, Democrats hope he doesn't show up, right?
Well, I don't know. He motivates our folks, too.
So we'll see.
Okay, so we both hope he shows up.
All right, we're going to leave it at that. We thank you very much. Mark Baker, Brandon Jones, thank you very much for joining us on the side.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Enjoyed it.
And we'll be right back. Thank
Good
you
to
very
see
much.
you.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Be right back. Thanks to Mark Baker and Brandon Jones for joining us tonight. A reminder, if you missed this or any other episode of Mississippi Insight, go to our website. It's WJTV.com. For Gerald Harris, I'm Byron Brown. We'll see you back here again next Saturday. Until then, make it a good night.